Okay, I think we will make a start because time will be passing us by very quickly, no doubt. So welcome everybody to this expert session at the PAVO conference. We are delighted to see you all here this afternoon and that you've been able to find time in your busy diaries to come along. Jen is busy on the tech side, letting people in and helping people out. So any issues, please do give Jen a shout or put a message in the chat pane at the bottom. So hopefully you're all in the right place. This is the expert session, Leadership Under Pressure. And we are delighted to welcome Chris, who's joined us today from Iraq. So we are hoping very much that the internet will hold out for us. I keep looking, he keeps moving around on the screen. I hope we haven't lost him. I can see him now, that's okay. So Chris grew up locally in Hay-on-Wye and attended Wynnyfed High School before embarking on a remarkable army career. Chris is an author, a bomb disposal expert, and former British Army officer. He joined the Army at 16 and was commissioned to Sandhurst Military Academy, and later served with specialist counter-terrorism units, including operations in the Balkans, Northern Ireland, Colombia, Afghanistan, and Iraq. Chris was awarded the Queen's Gallantry Medal. He has been a senior intelligence analyst at the MOD and was seconded to Cobra during the London suicide bombings. Since retiring from the military, Chris has written a number of books about his experience in Iraq, and he regularly contributes to television and radio news programmes. As I said, Chris joins us today from Iraq, where he is carrying out humanitarian work, supporting and training the local community on clearing IEDs. Chris is going to share with us this afternoon a brief insight into his experiences of leadership under pressure and how we can all take some learning to use in our lives. Chris is going to talk for about 40 minutes and share some slides, and then we'll have around 20 minutes for Q&As afterwards. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Major Chris Hunter. Chris.
Thank you very much, Claire. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can you just all give me a wave so I know that you can all hear me? Fantastic, thank you. Okay. Well, it's a great honour and a pleasure to be chatting to you. I was going to say this evening. It's we're 3 hours ahead of you here in Iraq. My first real experience with Parvo was during the lockdown. You know, they say that every generation has their war. Thankfully, I think for most of us, you know, this is about the closest thing that most people have seen to war. But it was amazing, actually, because it was the way, you know, the community came together, the way Parvo did a truly amazing job. As the president of the British Legion in Hay-on-Wye, we turned it into a food bank during the pandemic, during the lockdown, and Parvo were tremendously supportive, and hopefully we were supportive of them in turn as well, doing some food deliveries and bits and pieces. But yeah, thought you guys were excellent, amazing, incredibly grateful to you as a community from Hay-on-Wye. So it gives me great pleasure and a great honour to be here to speak to you tonight. So thank you. I guess really I'm going to sort of share some of my insights in dealing with pressure. I guess some of you might think, well, what does a bomb disposal operator have in common with me in the voluntary sector? Well, the real answer is we have a tremendous amount in common. We all deal with pressure on a daily basis. We all deal with stress. We all deal with fear. We deal with danger occasionally. And I'll talk about how fear and danger can be two very different things. But it doesn't matter whether you're sort of hunched over an improvised explosive device that's been laid by ISIS, or whether you're just making a very difficult decision at work, because ultimately we all face the same consequences. We all face the same pressures. We have the same physiological effects on us as human beings. And of course, you know, ultimately it's about Maslow's needs. We want to provide for our families. We want to go home at the end of the day. We want to be decent human beings, make a difference. Hello, Gareth. I've just seen your brother there, Claire. And yeah, we are pretty much all the same, you know. So I'm going to share some of my insights, which on the face of it may seem a little bit sort of distant from some of your experiences. But I think quite quickly you'll see that the consequences are very much the same, and we've got an awful lot in common. So I'm going to try now and share. There we go. So I'll talk about performing under pressure, because I think that's probably one of the most relevant things to you guys, and a bit about leadership, teamwork, and making tough decisions. So my own background, my father was a bomb disposal operator during the Second World War. He was a bit of a randy old rascal. So he lied to my mother about his age. He was born in 1917, but back in the day, passports were written in pen and ink. So he changed his birthday to 1927 and told her he was 10 years younger. The net result of that, of course, is that I was he was very old when I was born. So as I was growing up, he died when I was quite young. I moved to Hay, grew up there, and went off the rails a little bit. But in 1988, he passed away, and it had a tremendous effect on me, a powerful, profound effect, as you'd imagine. I was 14 when my father died. So I was lucky. I managed to speak to him on his deathbed, and he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I think I want to join the army, Dad." And he said, "Well, I take it you want to be an officer." And I thought, "Oh, bugger, no pressure." And he actually said, "Well, he threw me a lifeline." He said, "Well, take my advice. If you want to be an officer, then at the very least, join as an enlisted soldier first. And if you can't demonstrate your leadership potential, then you'll never really make a decent officer anyway." So he threw me a bit of a lifeline there. So that was it. I joined the army at 16. I decided to go and get a trade. I joined the Royal Signals so I could get some sort of profession in communications. The only GCSE I got at Gwynedd High School, or only decent one, was a grade A in German. And as luck would have it, in 1989, there was a shortage of Russian linguists in British military intelligence. So some bright spark came up with the idea of recruiting 16-year-olds who had linguistic capabilities to be the next James Bond. So we were all doing our basic training. Someone came up and said, "Who wants to be James Bond?" We all put our hands in the air, and we were expecting to get the Aston Martin and the Walter PPK and all that sort of thing. And instead spent 2 years conjugating Russian verbs in a language laboratory. It wasn't really quite what it was cracked out to be. I was also the worst Russian linguist in the history of British military intelligence. So in 1994, I went to Sandhurst and decided I'd try and do something that I was fairly decent at. And it's quite interesting because Sandhurst, the military academy, the idea is to try and identify young men and women with leadership potential, and in a very short amount of time, turn them into the army's leaders that can go into war zones where pressures are incredibly difficult, and make the right decisions and lead. And the only way you can really simulate the stresses of combat in a year in a sort of peacetime environment is to exercise you and train you and push you really hard physically, and give you very, very little sleep. So it was lots of running, lots of push-ups, and hardly any sleep. And I think the thing I sort of took away from that, the quote you see up there on the screen, when you feel like quitting, think about why you started. Either give in, give up, or give it your all. And that was very much, a motto at Sandhurst. And it was lead, follow, or get out of the way, give in, give up, or give it your all. And I'm sure that's something that resonates with you guys within the sort of Parvo association of organizations as well. Because I think certainly with lockdown, that was something that was very, very prevalent with you guys. So I went away and did my year at Sandhurst. I'd been in the army for 5 years by this point, and still hadn't really done anything at all. But what the military is very good at doing is putting you into an environment where you cut your teeth very quickly. All that training, all the sort of education that you've been given, the idea is that you then go and put it into practice quite quickly. So in my case, it was going out to the war zone of the day, which was Bosnia in 1995. And that was one of those experiences where you sort of go away as a boy and you come back as a man. I was 22 years old. I had a troop of 45 soldiers, all of whom were older than me, and all of whom were infinitely more experienced in life than me as well. And I was trying to lead them in combats. And this phrase here, do what's right, not what is easy. I think that's something that I learned very, very quickly. It's very easy to sort of be popular and make the popular decisions. But I think, the military, certainly, it always espouses this point about integrity, about having the moral compass, about doing the right thing rather than just the easy thing. And I think the other sort of thing that really stuck out for me, that really, jumped out of the page for me, I'd had all this leadership training at Sandhurst, but I had a troop sergeant who'd been to prison. He then joined the Foreign Legion, then eventually got a job in the British military. That's the normal career progression really into the British military. So, you know, all this leadership stuff that I've been taught, he basically summed it up into the 3 R's. Have respect for yourself, have respect for others, and take responsibility for your actions. And that's certainly a mantra that I, you know, continued in my career, or at least tried to do so. After we finished now 7.5 months in the Balkans, we were then told as a troop we were going to be deploying to Northern Ireland. And in good military fashion, our training for Northern Ireland lasted about 2 weeks. And instead, in the 6 months intervening, we got sent to the jungle to do jungle warfare training, and then 8 weeks in the Arctic to do Arctic warfare training in the Arctic Circle. So not really that relevant, but again, went out to Northern Ireland and kind of, you know, learned a bit more. I was a bit more sort of experienced as a young soldier, as a young officer. But I put this quote up here: "Walk with kings, nor lose the common touch." It comes from Rudyard Kipling's poem, "If." You know, if you can walk with, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blame it on you. And it's something that my mother, she used to love that poem. She was always sort of reciting verses from it to my brothers and I. And this one in particular really resonated: "Walk with kings, nor lose the common touch." And the idea is that, you know, don't think you're better than anybody else, but certainly don't think that you're beneath anybody else either. And adapt to your environment. Be able to converse with kings, nor lose the common touch, basically. I think it was really, really important. And it's something that's continued in my life now. You know, when I work in places like Iraq, in Libya, in Syria, you know, being able to actually blend in and identify and respect the culture, I think is really, really important. Understand these people, and very quickly you realize that, you know, we've got an awful lot more in common than we think on the face of it. And the other point was, you know, explain rather than tell, inspire rather than demonstrate. Basically, lead by example. So that's what I did. That was my first 2 years. You can see down here, there's an image on the bottom right-hand side. It was an explosion at the headquarters in Northern Ireland. And one day I was driving into the headquarters. You have to sort of continue doing essays and things like that as a young officer, just to make sure that you know, you can read and write. And I was driving in to go and do one of my junior officers' essays one day. And as we were in the rush hour traffic, there was a massive explosion inside the headquarters. And we went into full lockdown, and people left their cars and just ran away. Other people were stuck in their cars. I was in this queue of traffic, unable to go forwards or backwards, and just watching this entire episode unfold, this chaos, this carnage, as people were running away from the explosions. And then about 10 minutes later, there was a second car bomb detonated, again inside the headquarters complex next to the medical center. And it was a couple of IRA car bombs at the time. And what was interesting, after the second car bomb exploded, there was a group of these guys running around, smashing the car windows, looking for any third car bomb, you know, any tertiary car bombs. And they had no robots, no bomb suits, no equipment, just literally, you know, dressed like we are, smashing the windows. And I thought it was a tremendous act of bravery. And I went and met them all in a bar a couple of weeks later, and just gelled with them. And they also like to have a drink as well. So we had a few beers in the mess, got on like a house on fire. And that really was my epiphany moment. I'd sort of, you know, always had a predisposition towards soldiering. And, you know, I was in the cadets when I was in Hay-on-Wye. I, you know, was quite successful as a recruit and as an officer cadet. I had a real sort of bent towards soldiering, but when I got into bomb disposal, I realized that actually, and I don't mean this to sound in any way big-headed, but when I got into bomb disposal, I had a gift. It was something that's, you know, truly resonated with me, and something that, you know, I still to this day feel I was meant to do. And I'll talk a bit more about that as I go through. The downside in my plan was that, as I mentioned, I had a GCSE grade A in German. I had 5 other GCSEs at grade C or above, but I wasn't an Einstein. And in order to become a counter-terrorist bomb disposal operator, it's a 14-month course with over 200 exams. You do degree level nuclear physics, explosive chemistry, metallurgy taught to you by a NASA astronaut. It was way, way, way above my level of intellect and experience. So it meant a tremendous amount of hard work. And you do 6 months of this, a master's degree crammed into 6 months, and then you go away and do 8 months of hands-on explosives and ammunition training and all that sort of stuff. And of the 200 and whatever it was exams, you're allowed to fail three strikes and you're out. And I managed to fail the first 2 exams in my first month. So, you know, again, it was an awful lot of pressure. So I guess if I was going to talk to you about how to deal with pressure, I could just bang on about, you know, my first month on my my ATO course, but I'll save it for as we go through this this talk. But as I got into it, you know, I managed to get through the academic side, and it also gave me a thirst for knowledge, which I continued throughout my my career. But it also made me realise that, you know, these people were like me. It was like literally being with you know, brothers and sisters. We became incredibly close, even to this day, and also the work was incredibly gratifying and rewarding. You have to be psychometrically tested and psychiatrically evaluated to do this work. And interestingly, people think you're some sort of adrenaline junkie, and it's absolutely not the case. They look for people that can find, you know, logical answers to problems. They look to people that can problem solve quite quickly. But certainly, you know, nobody is in any way superhuman, and absolutely nobody is in any way a sort of adrenaline junkie. That's really not the sort of people that they look for, really. So one of the other aspects of this was in the school, they had this this mantra up on the wall: luck is not a factor, hope is not a strategy, fear is not an option. And after the course, we went off and we all got posted to our respective units. And normally you start off in one of the 11 bomb disposal units in the United Kingdom, sorry, on the British mainland. And I was down in southeast in Kent at Shorncliffe Troop. And we cut our teeth in what we call bombs made by the mad, the bad, and the sad, the criminals, the cranks, and the domestic terrorists. And I turned up there now as a young captain, responsible for my troop. I had the ports of, you know, Folkestone, Dover, the Channel Tunnel all came under my sort of area of responsibility. But I had some very, very experienced warrant officers and senior non-commissioned officers working for me as well. And although I was kind of experienced by this point, I had to literally go back to basics and learn all over again. And I remember asking one of my warrant officers, you know, can you give me some advice? And he said, the only advice I'll give you, sir, is don't learn the tricks of the trade, learn the trade. And that was something that was also a valuable lesson in life too. So I spent about a year doing sort of cutting my teeth against the mad, the bad, and the sad, and then went off to do what we call the high threat operators course, which is where you're dealing with devices that are designed specifically to target you as a bomb technician. So, you know, you may sort of think on the face of it that bomb disposal work is dangerous. Well, when the bombs are actually specifically designed to catch you out and kill you as an individual, then it takes it up to another level. And basically, there's only a finite number of these twisted psychopaths, these bomb makers, terrorists around the world that can manufacture these devices to the sort of levels that we see in terrorist organizations. So we don't just neutralize them, but we're trained in the investigation side of it, bomb scene investigation, and we look at the forensics, the DNA, the biometrics. And the idea is that, you know, rather than shooting the arrow, you attack the archer. If you can find these bomb makers, if you can bring them to justice, you take them off the streets, then it usually tends to sort of very quickly close down a criminal enterprise or a terrorist organization. But the downside of that, of course, is that you become a target yourself as well. So the other aspect that fell out of that was if plan A doesn't work, there are 25 other letters in the alphabet. And I know for you guys, you know, when COVID kicked in, when the lockdown came into place, you literally had to rip up the rule book, rip up the manual, and you were going in blind with everything you were doing. I think it's probably fair to say. And it's the same with us sometimes as well. We deal with improvised explosive devices. They're not made to factory level precision standards. They're not, you know, mass produced necessarily in all cases. Every single device is different. So you never know what you're actually dealing with until you've made that final cut of the detonator leads and broken the device down into its component forms. So you can never make a clear 100% accurate plan. So when I was doing my high threat course and I spoke to my boss and I said, any advice? He said, basically, always keep smiling, make a plan, and if plan A doesn't work, remember there's 25 letters in the alphabet. Just don't throw your teddy in the corner when it goes belly up. So did all of that sort of stuff, and like my other colleagues, we went off and then did sort of continuation and advancement in our careers. And for me, that was working as the operations officer for the UK's response to a terrorist weapon of mass destruction. So I spent a lot of time with Aldermaston, the atomic weapons establishment, and Portadown, the chemical and biological weapons establishment, learning how to deal with those sorts of devices should a terrorist deal with them. So literally went from being a complete biff at school to now sort of understanding, advanced nuclear physics and biochemistry. So did a bit of that. And what was quite interesting that sort of came out of that is that, you're never, ever able to make 100% plan. And, you saw the events in Salisbury, and sadly, we've had poisonings, Litvinenko, things like that. You have to very quickly come up with some sort of solution, whether it's an investigation or it's a national crisis response. You never have all the information, and you certainly don't have the resources. I guess the phrase that I've used for this, the best is the enemy of the good. The only phrase I really learned and remembered in Russian was Хороший противник хорошего, which is the best is the enemy of the good. And the idea being that, don't waste your time making the 100% best plan. Sometimes you just got to go with the best you can. And the analogy, of course, that the Russians used to use was that during the space race, NASA spent $10 million designing a pen that you could write with in zero gravity in space. And of course, the Russians, they just used a pencil. So the best is the enemy of the good. And then I went off to the Special Forces. And for every young soldier, I guess the ultimate job is working in the SAS. That's what everybody wants to do. I actually got married, had a firework display. All my mates did the firework display for me. We got married at 11 o'clock in the morning. The firework display was at 11 o'clock at night. I already mentioned the fact that, bomb technicians like to have a drink to celebrate as well. So by the time we had the firework display, all my mates were absolutely smashed. And, those sort of scenes from the black and white videos you see from the First World War, from the Somme, where the soldiers are silhouetted by the explosions. When we had the most amazing firework display you could imagine. It was truly remarkable. And then suddenly there was this explosion, and one of my pals was holding his face, and a firework had exploded, got into his eye, blinded him temporarily. He was court-martialed. I was court-martialed. We both somehow got away with it. He got his sight back and was promoted, and my punishment was to go to the Special Air Service. So somehow we sort of fell in the brown stuff and came out smelling of roses. But it was the most amazing experience. And obviously I'm not going to talk lots about the Special Forces because necessarily there's a degree of secrecy surrounding it. But what I would say is the phrase "who dares wins" is a phrase that most people are aware of and associate with the Special Forces. The only phrase I really heard was the phrase "the basics done well." And that for me was the epitome of serving with the Special Forces. There's nothing truly sort of, it's not James Bond gadgets and all that sort of stuff. It's just everything they do, they go back to first principles, back to basics, and they just do it really, really well, and then build on it and develop it and enhance it. And that was what I got from those guys. So I spent a couple of years on the hostage rescue team doing that sort of stuff. I had to tell all my family and friends back home in Hay-on-Wye that I'd left the army because I couldn't admit to working there. And then I went off for another couple of years and worked with the Special Boat Service, doing the same sort of thing, but in the marine environments. And I guess, what I realized from that is that you're on a 10-minute pager to go anywhere in the world. Back in the day, it was a pager, of course, So, you had to literally have all your stuff squared away. You had to be really organized because literally you would be getting that pager call. The next thing you'd be in you'd be issued an unmarked vehicle with blue lights in the grills. You'd be driving down to an airhead somewhere with all your equipment, and then you'd go and meet the team. You'd get on the back of a Hercules, get all your parachute and wetsuit on, and then you'd be parachuting into the Atlantic and then doing a 40 nautical mile chase after something like the QE2. You then do a 20-foot swell, climb up a caving ladder, you know, in these horrendous conditions, and then go to the bridge, deal with a suicide bomb on the bridge, and take down the ship and save 1,000 passengers. You know, that was certainly what we do in an exercise anyway. And then come back at the end of the weekend and you know, have dinner with your wife, and she was like, "How's your week been, darling?" You know, and you're trying to sort of explain how that is. But the one thing that really fell out of that was the 7 Ps. You know, prior preparation and planning prevents a very poor performance. These guys really have it squared away. So I guess, you know, admin and organisation and the importance of that really fell out from that. And then we went off and did something really, really different. Went off and worked on counter-suicide bomber operations. And we'd never had a suicide bomber in the UK. And this was something really, really new and really novel. And, you know, the question was asked to me, how can you defeat an enemy who looks into the barrel of your gun and sees paradise? And I quipped, you pull the trigger. But that wasn't the answer that they were after. We came up with lots and lots of novel, innovative ways to defeat a suicide bomber should one ever occur on the British mainland. And you see at the top right-hand side of the screen there, Richard Reid, the shoe bomber. He decided to try and blow up a transatlantic flight. But very few people know about his accomplice, probably this guy in the middle here, Sajid Badat. And the night my second daughter was born, we were, our pages were going off. We drove into Gloucester, and this guy and his accomplices had built a second shoe bomb, and they were going to try and take down a second aircraft in the Atlantic. So all this sort of novel stuff that we'd come up with, suddenly it came to fruition, and we went and arrested the first suicide bomber in the UK. And I put this up here. You know, we either alter the difficulties or alter ourselves to meet them. Don't fear change, change fear. And the reason I say that is because we'd been dealing almost exclusively with the IRA at that point. And when my team and I, you know, we'd all sort of worked with the special forces for a couple of years. We used to go around in black kit, or we'd go around in plain clothes, and had all sorts of, you know, Gucci equipment and fast cars. We were known as dopes on ropes by the rest of our trade. There was a bit of professional envy there. And a lot of guys said, basically, you know, you're just a waste of taxpayers' money, before we went and arrested the suicide bombers, of course. And my response was, you know, it wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. So I think, you know, it's always worth thinking about R&D and looking to the future and trying to make some sort of provision, because you guarantee it'll bite you otherwise. And then carrying on from that, went off and did some covert bomb disposal work with the with MI5. And I guess the lesson from that really was never underestimate how much a team can achieve when no one individual cares who gets the credit. Because these guys, you know, nobody knows who they are. They're nameless, they're faceless, and they never get any credit at all. The only time you hear about MI5 is when they get it wrong. And yet the morale within them is absolutely phenomenal, and the level of professionalism and the level of commitment. And I honestly believe it's because, you know, how much a team can achieve when no one cares who gets the credit. Either give credit to everybody, or be careful when you're just attributing it to one person. And then went off to Colombia, did some work over there, and went off to Iraq on May the 5th, 2004. And this was interesting. I had a Welsh squadron commander, and it was proper South Walian from Neath, had a really strong Welsh accent, and said, "You're going off to do the most dangerous job in the most dangerous place in the world," in a really strong South Walian accent, and was chuckling away to himself. And that was going off to Iraq to do bomb disposal. And the way we work is we deploy it on our own, and then we meet a composite team when we get to an environment. So the very first thing was to build a team. And this phrase, none of us are effective as all of us, together everyone achieves more. My first job was to try and pull together this team. And because they're provided by lots of different organizations, lots of different military units, they don't choose their best people to come to you, because they need their best people for their own operations. So what they tend to do is send the bad boys and girls. So this team was like the dirty dozen. And I thought to myself, okay, we're doing the most dangerous job in the world in the most dangerous place in the world. We've been working predominantly against the IRA, who are the world's leading bomb makers for 30 years. Every terror group in the world went to them. They were the sort of go-to guys for technical know-how. And they were far more advanced than anybody else in the world at that time. And by May the 5th, 2004, the insurgency in Iraq had been going on for 1 year. And the insurgents in Iraq in 1 year had superseded the level of technical sophistication achieved by the IRA in 30 years. So you could see it was literally, you know, their level of success and achievement was just, you know, going vertically. So I thought, how do I motivate these guys? How do I get them to gel as a team? You know, what can we do? And I thought about all the cliched leadership mantras that we hear, some of which I've been using up until now in this presentation. I thought about incentivization in corporate organizations, which is always a financial incentivization of some sort. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't happen in any of the government, as we know, and especially not in the armed forces. So I thought, you know, how am I going to motivate these guys to be prepared to do the most dangerous job, to be prepared to sacrifice themselves if necessary for one another, for the team, and for the greater good, and all for what effectively works out less than the minimum wage, because they're called upon 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I thought one of the most important things I can do here is just be honest with them. So I said to them, you know, I know you've been bad boys. I know you don't really like authority and you know, the military discipline and all that sort of stuff. So here's the deal. I've been with the Special Forces for 4 years. I haven't been called sir in a long time. I haven't been saluted in a long time. It's all first name terms. So you call me boss or you call me Chris. There's no sir, none of that nonsense. You don't salute me. You know, we are all equals here, and you will all have an equal voice. And whatever you've done in the past, I don't really care about. But what you do now, you'll be remembered by, and you'll remember this for the rest of your lives, because you will tangibly be doing a job where you'll be making a difference and you'll be saving people's lives. And you may never get a chance to do that again. You may go back to being a bad boy again, but at least you know that there's a time in your life where you did something that really made a difference. And I genuinely meant it. And they genuinely bought it. And literally, you know, day one, we became a team, which was quite lucky, actually, because in that environment, as I said, they'd superseded the level of technical sophistication that the IRA achieved in 30 years. We were dealing with massive truck bombs, massive car bombs, and really, really high-end radio-controlled bombs and things like that. 4 days into the tour, whereas everybody else was having lots of time to acclimatize, 4 days into the tour, I found myself in 52 degrees Celsius, going out, started off at 8 o'clock in the morning, dealing with a bank of rockets. And if any of those rockets had actually functioned, they would literally have vaporized me. They were stuck on a mechanical timer with 1 minute left on the clock. And it was literally just stuck fast with a grain of sand. And they were pointing at our divisional headquarters. So, you know, we couldn't really afford to let them go. We couldn't get a robot down there. We'd normally use a robot. We would wear a bomb suit and go down with hook and lines and that sort of thing. It was all very, very difficult. And in the bomb suit, I literally, on my first job, went down there 52 degrees and finished the task, but then keeled over with heat exhaustion and woke up in the medical center, you know. And after that, I decided I would never do a job again wearing the bomb suit in Iraq during that tour, because it was just going to be too hot and too physically degrading to the body. And it's quite interesting because when you take that long walk up to a bomb, we call it the long walk. It's only typically 100 or 200 meters, but it feels like 100 or 200 miles. And it's where literally every single step is labored, and you leave the relative safety of your team, what we call the incident control point, and then you go forwards to you know, to the danger zone, to the improvised explosive device. And as I mentioned, you never have a full plan. So literally, you know, you have a 90% plan. You never have the equipment you really need. You take whatever you've got, and then you're literally every single step as you're going up to that bomb, you know, the drawbridge goes up behind you, the visor comes down, and then you become entirely focused on that device. And as you're taking each step towards it, you're thinking about, you know, any peripheral threats. Am I in a sniper's scope? Is there going to be mortar fire coming in? Is there going to be an ambush? And then as you get closer to it, you're looking for ground sign, you know, absence of the normal, and I'm trying to think of the phrase, actually. I've just forgotten it. And sorry, presence of the normal and absence of the normal and presence of the abnormal. That's it. Finally got there. The idea is anything at all that's an anomaly, that could be you know, something cheeky. And then when you get to the device itself, you've then got to try and interpret that bird's nest loop of wires and you know, work out what the design, what the device type is, Is it designed to kill individuals, in a distance? Is it designed to kill police, security forces, members of the public, or is there something more sinister there designed to kill me? So there's a whole lot of things going through your mind as you're dealing with that. And I put this slide up here. Fear is not real. It's the product of the thoughts we create. Danger is real, but fear is a choice. We can choose to face our fear, embrace it, and transform it into something exciting, or be overcome by fear and step back into safety. And the real point from this is that danger is physical, but fear is just an emotion. And I think fear is the single greatest thing I've seen curtail people's success. And when we can actually break it down, when we can take a step back, and when we can compartmentalize it, and we can say, right, is this physical danger, or is it just the emotion from a perceived danger? Or quite often fear is, fear of failure or fear of ridicule or something like that. And when we can break it down, then we can obviously overcome it. And sometimes we can actually use that sort of excitement, that adrenaline from it to turn it into a positive energy, as if we're going on a fun fair ride or something like that, when you want to go again and again and again. So you can channel it into something more positive as well. But I digress. So there are other risks. There was roadside bombs continuously, and I'll just show you this bit of video. There was constant rocket and mortar attacks, snipers. There were obviously insurgents waiting for us. They dig in devices at the side of the road and then follow up with some sort of ambush. And there were camel spiders, these things, which are called a sepulchre. It's a cross between a scorpion and a spider. They can run 10 miles an hour. They can jump 3 feet into the air, and they're nocturnal hunters. So they basically climb onto your body when you're asleep. They inject an anesthetic into you, and then they just start eating away at your flesh. These things were really horrific. And probably the only thing more horrific than a camel spider was this creature, Piers Morgan. And he decided he was going to publish some obviously fake photographs. And this is where I say prepare for the unexpected. I guess basically, plan for every eventuality, but also be aware that there's consequences to all our actions, because he has a big ego, and I've spoken to him about this since. I've worked with him since, and kind of forgiven him, but he does have a huge ego. But the fact that he chose to do this knowingly meant that lives were lost as a direct result. The very following day, there was a fatwa issued against British forces, putting a price on our head. They were incensed by these images, as you would imagine. Literally, my second day on the job, I was out doing more rockets and more improvised explosive devices. We did some in the morning, did some at lunchtime. Our robot broke down because of the heat. We got it repaired and then went out and did another device in the evening. And then as we were on our way back to the headquarters, we were driving these Land Rover, slightly armored Land Rovers, and these box-bodied bomb disposal vehicles with no armor at all, and literally driving along in 3 vehicles. And then suddenly, as we were driving through a normal township where people are outside smoking shisha pipes, drinking tea, and looked like they were minding their own business, suddenly 2 of them jumped up, ran inside, and then all of these about 60 guys pulled out machine guns, Kalashnikovs, rocket-propelled grenades, and opened up on us. And it was without doubt the most terrifying experience of my life. And maybe we can talk about that in questions about how that affects you and what it does to you. But we all managed to get away with it. We all managed to get out of there. It was the first time I'd ever engaged with the enemy. I don't mean in witty conversation. I mean actually shooting them. I was shot myself. My number 2 was shot as well. But I guess, when dealing with fear, because it was absolutely paralyzing fear, I think the reality is that you accept the situation. That's the first thing you do. You then break it down into its component forms. You rationalize it. You accept that you're in that situation, obviously. Then you rationalize it. And then the planning, experience, the training, all of those things that are important. When you're under extreme pressure, you can't think straight. You can't use your frontal cortex. You can only use your limbic system, your muscle memory in the back of your brain, certainly in the initial stages. So if you've done something before, if you've rehearsed it, if you've practiced it, if you've done contingency, then you can recall it. When it comes to an ambush, you can't really practice it effectively in a realistic way. So when it happens to you, you just freeze. And again, I'll talk some more about that. But the physiological response to stress and pressure is usually some sort of freezing. But if you know how to deal with it by doing those things I've mentioned there, then actually you can overcome it quite quickly or prevent it altogether. So we got out of the ambush. We managed to survive, and again I'll talk about that in questions. Okay, and then after that it was very much a case of that was literally a week into the tour, and we had to still carry on doing our job. And I said here, doubt kills more dreams than failure ever will. We achieve success when we suppress our fear of making mistakes. Success is not final, but nor is failure. You make mistakes, mistakes don't make you. And I had to get my troop to go, my team to go out the next day and drive through the area that we'd been ambushed in. And that was quite a task in itself. Not just motivating them to get, to come along, but actually motivating myself to go through when I was terrified myself as well. And after that, we had another 45 tasks in 8 weeks. I mentioned this idea of shoot the archer, not the arrow. Only the OODA loop. We have something called the OODA loop, the observation, orientation, decide, and action. Everything we do in life, we observe, we orientate, we decide, we act. Well, our opponents do exactly the same. Our competitors do exactly the same. So the idea is that, your OODA loop and their OODA loop, yours needs to be faster and more effective and more efficient. So you can basically create your decisions and actions more effectively and more quickly than your opponents. And that's exactly what we did with the bad guys. As a result of that, we ended up getting targeted as a team, and I was told there was a price on my head. And that's quite a difficult thing as well. When you've got to make those choices, someone's actually trying to kill me. But then, of course, I mentioned when you're dealing with fear and danger, you put it into perspective. And for me, that was all about rationalizing it. And I figured, well, everyone was a target there. There was a price on every soldier's head. So, whether I was worth a few $100s more doesn't really make any difference. So it was a case of business as usual. But interestingly, every time we went out on the ground after that, there was always some sort of news crew or big crowd waiting to see what was going to happen, because they'd been told you're going to get a bomb man. And literally the next day, there was a radio controlled bomb waiting for me down at the business end. And I had a jammer, which luckily managed to jam it and stop the attack signal from getting me. But it came to a bit of a head when this car bomb was put out. And I'm going to play this bit of video footage. Okay, that car bomb was put outside an A&E hospital, and it was heavily weighted down on its back axles. We didn't know it was a car bomb at the time, of course, but I'd been told literally the day before that they were out to kill the golden-haired bomb man. And as I was the only bomb man in Basra, and my hair goes blonde in the sunshine, I figured that was quite a good enough target indication. So they put it outside a hospital, knowing that we would have to go down there and do it literally with a pair of wire cutters. Pardon me, no bomb suit, no robot, nothing like that. But I wasn't brave enough to do that. So I improvised, climbed through the window, and then asked everyone to get to the back of the hospital to get them away from the danger area. They didn't speak very good English, so I waved my pistol around and shouted a lot. And, because they've been used to Saddam and the Baathists and all that sort of stuff, that seemed to work quite well. And they went to the back of the hospital, and after the car bomb exploded, nobody was injured. So that was kind of a success, although it did destroy my robot eventually. And I guess I'm just going to move on to this. Never losing sight of the aim, okay? Basically, we followed this idea of don't shoot the arrow, shoot the archer. I did everything I could to go and start tracking down the bomb makers. And 77 days into the tour, we were told that the secret police had captured some guys and were torturing them. So we went and asked to speak to these guys. They said, no, there's nobody in here, and you could hear the screams. So we kicked the doors down, went in there, and we found these guys. And ironically, we saved the lives of the bomb makers. But when you hear about torture and all that sort of stuff and waterboarding, we don't do that sort of stuff. We literally sit down and we bore them to death for 10 hours, and we play to their egos. And bomb makers have huge egos. So literally they put the intelligence guys through there talking to them. They put the police investigators through. And then I sat down and I told the guy he was the best bomb maker I'd ever seen in my life. And he was truly awesome. and he thought I was his best mate, and he even drew me a circuit diagram. And from that, I was able to tell that he was the lead bomb maker in the north of the city. So I thought, in for a penny, in for a pound. I said, actually, you're probably not the best. There's probably one slightly better than you in the south of the city. And because of his ego, he was so incensed, he gave us the address of the second bomb maker as well. So day 101, we went in, kicked down some doors, and arrested the second bomb maker team. So I guess the lesson from that really is, remember what your mission is, remember what your ultimate objective is, and don't lose sight of the aim. So really, just to finish off, after that, I was very privileged and honoured to get a medal for the things I did there. It was a great honour to get it from Her Majesty the Queen. It also makes you feel incredibly guilty about the people that didn't get them, or indeed that didn't come back. But after that, it was going to be desk jobs forevermore, and I wasn't ready for desk jobs. I went off and became a bodyguard and a counter-terrorism consultant, going to various different war zones. I wrote some books, did some book talks, ended up for some reason doing motivational speaking on the back of doing book talks, and on the back of that ended up going onto TV and eventually presented a documentary for the History Channel. But there was something still missing. Did a bit of charity work as well, but I realized actually that it wasn't what I wanted to do, and it wasn't what I was meant to do. So I'm just going to finish with this last couple of slides. And in the military, they have what they call the components of fighting power. The idea is you have a physical component, a conceptual, and a moral. The physical is the manpower, the equipment, the resources, basically. The conceptual is the doctrine, the policy, the standing operating procedures, that sort of side, the paperwork side of it. But the moral component is something that's really important. And I think it's something that will resonate with you guys. And it's something that when I talk to industry and large, corporate organizations, they always try and motivate people and incentivize them by financial incentives, basically, or indeed threatening them in some cases. And I think for me, the most successful way of motivating has always been that moral component. It's about having that just cause. Why do soldiers go to war zones and they're prepared to lay down their lives on the minimum wage, never see their family, sacrifice their freedoms? Why do they do it? And it's not because they're stupid. It's because they actually genuinely believe that they're doing something for the greater good. Why do you guys do what you do? Because there's that huge moral component to it. And I think, if you can find that just cause, even if it's working for a bank, but knowing that you're keeping, part of the critical national infrastructure functioning, then maybe you can justify that as well. But for me, that's certainly a huge part. And I've done many, many bad things in my life, and I've certainly gone off the rails as well. But for me, my just cause was bomb disposal. It's what I had a gift for. So 3.5 years ago, I came back into it, went out to Iraq, then out to Syria, then out to Libya. And that's what I do now, and absolutely love it. And I'll finish off with this slide. Just remember, improvise, adapt, and overcome. When I was in the army, we had amazing robots that cost $1 million each, £1 million each. We had jammers that could jam all sorts of radio frequencies. We had specially designed weapon systems that would fire jets of high power water at a bomb to stop it from detonating. Okay. I don't have any robots here. I don't have any jammers. I don't have a bomb suit. It's just my snips, my training, my knowledge, and the amazing team that I work with. And the 45 devices I did there in that in that 4-month period in Iraq that you just heard me talk about. I did 45 devices by hand this week in Iraq that were ISIS devices. And in the last 2 months, I've done over 300. It's a completely different level, and we have no equipment, no resources. And you'll see there at the right-hand side, you can see the operator there putting 3 water bottles next to a radio-controlled improvised explosive device. We don't have any disruptors. We don't have all the kit. But by using that, by improvising, using our technical knowledge with a bit of detonating cord, okay, there's the radio-controlled improvised explosive device. He's put those water bottles there. And by detonating the water, using science and physics and about less than $1 worth of water, he's completely destroyed that radio-controlled IED. So remember, when the chips are down, improvise, adapt, and overcome. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings me to the end of my talk. Thank you very much indeed for many of you are still signed in. Thank you. Yeah. Can I take any questions?
It's absolutely fantastic, Chris, and thank you for sharing that journey with us. I've heard you speak before, as you know, a number of years ago now in the theatre in Brecon, but it always astounds me, the work that you and your colleagues have done over the years. And a few things really stood out for me, really. So what you were saying about finding your just cause, and certainly in the voluntary sector, we all are joined really in trying to make lives better for individuals in our communities. And that is why we do what we do, just to make that little bit of a difference. And what also stood out for me as well about doubt kills more dreams than failure ever will. And for me, and I'm sure many people on the call, that's something we need to hold on to. There's always those moments where we doubt our ability, doubt our choices. And yeah, it's about striving forward really, and continuing to keep that just cause in our minds while we try to change and adapt what we do. People hear enough of me talking on these meetings, so I'm going to hand over now and ask if there's anybody with any questions they would like to ask Chris. There's loads of amazing stuff coming in the chat pane, I can see, Chris, but anybody brave enough, overcome your fear and put your hand up and ask a question.
Okay, Louise Hardwick, yeah, there you go, you were first.
Hi, Chris. That was absolutely amazing. Really, really, really interesting. And apart from the spiders bit, but what would be your favourite part, your all-time favourite point of all the years you've done this? What would be your biggest achievement?
You know, what a great question. I think probably just what I'm doing right now. No, there's two things. I guess one was during COVID. I got back home by the skin of my teeth. I got the last flight out of the Balkans, having come via Syria, and was able to spend the whole of the first lockdown with my wife and kids. And that was a huge treat. Otherwise I would have been, you know, it would have been pretty hellish, to be honest with you. And the guys in the Legion and working with you guys, being able to do the food bank. I've spent most of my adult life in conflict zones, in war zones. And they say, you know, men make wars and wars make men. Obviously that's a sexist remark, but you know where I'm coming from with it. What I do think is that war definitely brings out the very, very worst in mankind, in the human race, but it also brings out the very, very best in the human race. And what it's done for me is made me realize that actually people are fundamentally good. We're affected by our DNA, by our genes. We're affected by our learning history, by our experiences, and we're affected by our environments. And, you know, any one of those things changes, then it can change our behavior, I think, you know. But I don't think that people are always necessarily good, but that's because of their genes potentially, but certainly their learning history and certainly their environment. But I do think that given the chance, people want to make a difference, and people are generally good. They're better than they are worse, for sure. And I've seen that in, you know, across the human race. And when I was back home in lockdown, I saw that in my own hometown. I saw the people that were privileged and, you know, more comfortably, better off, not sort of, you know, thinking, look at me, I'm nice and comfortable, but actually getting out there, bringing food in, doing what they could for the local community. I saw the people that didn't have anything, you know, doing exactly the same thing, bringing food in, trying to help wherever they could do. And I saw that the people in need were generally, you know, getting what they could. And, you know, worked quite a lot with Claire. And when Parvo couldn't get to somebody with food, you know, other organizations were helping to get those things in need to people. So that was quite a special time for me, because I got to see my family, but also it reaffirmed my faith in the human spirit and in people. And I think just the work that I'm doing now, I love it. And you know, it's great to be able to, but it does feel really, really weird doing a motivational talk from Iraq when I was doing bombs this morning and then talking to you guys this evening, you know. And all my mates are through there behind in the room, and they're all going to be ripping the mickey out of me, by the way, when I come off this call, you know. So yeah, I hope that answered your question, Louise.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Anybody else want to put their hands up and ask a question? I can't see everybody on the screen, so you might need to use the reaction function and put a virtual hand up. although there is a question in the chat pane I noticed pop up. So I'll ask that one in the meantime. So Chris, Phil is asking, what do you do to look after your own well-being?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I struggled for quite a few years. When I wrote the books, I ended up also, I left the army, wrote the books. I got a 4-book deal. You know, I got a grade E at English literature and discovered I could write. You know, a lot of military authors have ghost writers. I wrote my books myself. They became bestsellers. And suddenly, you know, I got a big book deal. I set up a company doing counterterrorism consultancy and got some lucrative contracts. So I went from literally, you know, being on an army salary to making quite a lot of money. It changed our lives completely. Luckily, my wife then divorced me, kept all the money, and I went back to having no money again in a few months, which is great because it leveled me and, you know, made me realize what's actually truly important. But no, all joking aside, I went off and experienced my wilderness years, I guess, you know, and then I've come back. What was the question again, Claire? I've gone off on one there.
Okay. What do you do to support your own well-being?
And I went off. Thanks, Claire. I went off and went off in a bit of wilderness years and lived like a bit of a rock star in London for a few years. And it wasn't good for the soul. I'd forgotten who I was, and I had a lot of dark nights of the soul. When I wrote my second book, I also was supposed to do it 3 years previously, and I left it for 3 years and then was told, right, you need to pay the money back unless you write the book. And I wrote it in 6 months. And it was the before and after story of pretty much what I've told you now. And one of my brothers had killed himself, and there were a few dark things that I had to drag up. But I literally, you know, if there were 32 chapters in the book, it was a chapter a week sort of thing. And I literally dug up that part of my memory, you know, opened that Pandora's box of emotions, wrote about it, immersed myself in it, and then had to close that chapter, send it away to the editor, and then move on to something else. And it was quite a strange thing. So it definitely brought back the PTSD that I'd experienced when I was when I came back from the Balkans. And in answer to your question, how did I deal with it? And the answer is you rationalize it, you break it down, you accept it. You accept there's a problem, and you either go for counseling, you go for whatever sort of treatment that there is required. But you most importantly remember, I think, that it's a normal response to an abnormal situation. And once you've accepted that, once you've accepted that it will never be truly cured, but you just have it under control, you've got an acknowledgement of it, and you know the signs that may sort of trigger it again, I think then it becomes a lot easier to deal with. And I think truly, you know, when you've got the love and support of your family, and when you're doing a job where you've got your just cause, having money, I had money once, you know, it was an experience, like going to the theatre is an experience. But actually having a cause, having a job that you want to get out of bed for, doing something where you feel proud of yourself and, you know, your children feel proud of you. And I know Gareth and Claire are both on the call here, you know, they are one of the inspirations, their family, old family friends of ours, a true inspiration to me and my family, because every single one of that family is involved in service and has been, you know, since we were all children. And I think that truly is, you know, something that that helps you be a better version of yourself, and helps you stay focused and most importantly, happy. Yeah, for sure.
Great. Thanks, Chris. And thanks for that question, Phil. And certainly as well, Chris, as you're speaking, one of the things I think, if you don't mind me saying, that I think gets a lot of us through those darker times is home. With a lot of us are very lucky to have a good home, and that outdoor space that we're so lucky to live in here in Powys as well. Getting out to the mountains, I know, is a big thing, and getting that fresh air often brings a new perspective to our lives, doesn't it? So
I think it made something that we all probably, I don't think any of us took it for granted, but certainly, you know, when you saw the images of the guys that were living in cities, and then we had the, you know, that advantage, that privilege of the mountains, the River Wye, everything else. Yeah, I mean, we're very blessed, aren't we, to live in Wales? Yeah, for sure.
Okay, any more questions? Phil, that's why I'm moving. Phil's moving to Paris. We've converted him in a short space of time. Sharon's got a question.
I've actually got two for you, actually, Chris. As a past pupil of Gwynedd High School myself, have you ever been invited back to speak to the pupils there and motivate them on how you've succeeded in life?
Well, that's one of the reasons I changed my name, actually. My real name is Chris, but the surname I use is a pseudonym. I was a bad boy when I was at Gwynedd High School, and I don't think they'd believe it was me, actually, if I went back there. So, no, I haven't been invited back. I went there when I was in the Army Cadets. That was the last time. But I've got to say, I moved from the London area when I was 14 to Hay-on-Wye. I would definitely have gone to prison if I'd stayed in the London area at school. And, you know, when people criticize Gwynedd High School, as you know, it's easy to criticize the local area, isn't it? It definitely saved my life and put me on a path, you know, that would have been very, very different had I not gone there. So, yeah, that was your first question, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. The second question, then, obviously, the COVID pandemic is still with us. Ourselves in the third sector, alongside health and social care colleagues, are still working extremely hard. We're obviously facing a winter of extreme pressures to support people that are either in hospital or trying to be discharged home. For the team, I work within the Community Connected team, and sometimes within the team, some of the members get quite fatigued at working at such a pace. Have you ever experienced this with your own team? And if so, what have you done to motivate them?
What a great question. I'm not going to talk about what I've done to motivate them, Sharon, but what I would say is Lord Moran was Winston Churchill's physician. You may or may not be aware. I mean, you know, I've studied a lot of history as a soldier and as an officer, but you know, it's not like I know loads about history. I just happen to know a bit about Lord Moran and Winston Churchill's physician. And he talked about a stock of courage. And I'm sure you'll all be aware, Winston Churchill had what he called the black dog, you know, his acute depression throughout his time in various leadership roles. And Lord Moran really identified PTSD way before it became a four-letter acronym. And he talked about people having a stock of courage, as he called it. But the idea is that any one of us here on this call, we could physiologically be exactly the same sex, size, shape, you know, physical features. We could be identical twins, triplets, whatever we may be. But if we're exposed to exactly the same stress or pressure or trauma, any one of us could respond in a different way. Even if our levels of resilience were the same, yours or mine, Sharon, may deplete at a different rate. So he talked about this stock of courage, and the idea is that when you're exposed to stress or trauma or pressure, your stock of courage or resilience, as I would call it now, starts to deplete. The trouble is, as it starts to get lower and lower, it starts to deplete more quickly. And when it gets to a dangerously low level, then it's potentially irreversible. So what the military does now, and certainly what we do with our teams, we call it decompression. If you can remove someone from that environment of stress, pressure, whatever it may be, then you can replenish those levels of resilience, you know, whatever you want to call it, that lifeblood, if you like. If you keep them there for too long, then obviously, you know, it can be catastrophic. And how you do that, it doesn't need to be sending them off to the Bahamas, obviously, you know, but even a short break from it, a change of scenery, a change of environment can have a significant impact and effect, you know, for the better. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thanks, Chris.
Lovely, thanks for that, Sharon. And certainly we found that with the changes in COVID, and I'm sure other sector colleagues found the same, moving from, you know, senior colleagues in the office to working from home, being quite isolated, trying to manage the situation and learn new ways of delivering our services. I think many of us were heading towards that depletion zone, I guess. So what we've tried to do is encourage staff when we were allowed to come together, go for wellbeing walks and that kind of thing. Just having that time away from the screen has proved really valuable. But it's about finding that in yourself as well, isn't it? And allowing yourself to do that. I think sometimes we can be our own worst enemies, as it were, pressurizing ourselves. So I think for me, it's about making sure we step away and look after ourselves, whichever way that is, really. Any more questions?
Thank you, Chris, for your story. It's so interesting and fascinating. I made a comment in the chat. It made me just feel like I need to get out more. I need to get outside, get away from the desk, and be a bit more ambitious with some of my, some of my activities. So thank you for inspiring me about that. Something that came out really strongly from I think all the kind of anecdotes you shared was around the relationships and trust that you've developed with people, and how you do that actually really quite quickly as well. You gave a really good example about people you didn't know, and almost by day one you felt you kind of formed a team. I just wondered about some of the kind of techniques and tips, or any quick takeaways you could give about how you develop that trust and relationship with people, particularly in high pressure situations so quickly as well. Anything that I can take away to think about would be really useful. Thank you.
Sure, thanks. A great question, Joe, as well. I'm not an expert on it, so I can tell you what's worked for me and the way I've done it. But I've certainly, in recent times, I've gone to Libya, where as a country they hate Britain. I've gone to Syria, where as a country they distrust Britain. And I've gone to Iraq, where the first time I came here I was shot and they were my enemy. I've been here on and off for 3 years now, and without doubt I've made some of the closest friends of my life here. I think there's an intense mistrust between any cultures sometimes, when our perception is different to the reality. And quite often, what we get to go on is what we see in the media or the popular press, or indeed the negative press. We tend to hear the worst about human nature in our press, because they've got to get the ratings up and they've got to get the advertising revenue to do so. And by doing, by showing the bad stuff, it tends to attract more ratings, unfortunately. So how do I do it? And I think the answer is definitely, you've got to expose yourself. You've got to, that sounds terrible, I'm going to get arrested now. You've got to basically, show them who you really are, nuts and bolts, warts and all. I think you've got to be completely honest with people. In my case, you've got to lead by example. We obviously don't all have functions where it's necessarily a leadership role, or where we can give an example of, the person we are. But I think when we're trying to win someone's trust, it's that genuine transparency. This is me, nuts and bolts, warts and all. When I make a mistake, hands up. And I think most importantly, showing people that you genuinely respect them as a human being, and they're starting in a position of trust, rather than, as we tend to do as human beings, certainly as Brits, you've got to win our trust. There isn't always time to do that. So I think, for me, I've seen man at his best and man at his worst. I genuinely believe that people are good. So it's about giving them the benefit of the doubt, and definitely thinking, well, and I think in your line of work as well, it's just like mine. You tend to be working with decent human beings, and certainly people that genuinely want to make a difference. Otherwise, you'd all be in banking. You'd be doing something very, very different. But you want to make a difference. You're decent human beings. So I think just basically, show people that you're a decent person. Be prepared to, put your head above the parapet, and start with a level of trust with other people. And it tends to be reciprocated. But I'm not an expert, Joe. So, it's kind of worked for me.
Thanks, Chris. That's a useful thing to take away. Thanks very much.
My pleasure.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joe, and thanks, Chris. We've got time for one more question. And just a plea, actually, why somebody thinks of the last question to ask. Don't all disappear, because we do have a poll that we do need to run for each of our sessions, and that helps us build our future conferences. So we'd be grateful if you could all fill that in before you do head off for a cup of tea today. But anybody for one last bite of the cherry before we let Chris enjoy his evening? Nobody brave enough?
Could I jump in?
William. Okay, we've got two. Okay, we'll take the last two. I think we've got Emma's going to hand it up, and then
okay. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Chris, so much. Can I just ask you what advice you'd give to the 16-year-old Chris, and what advice you think Mr. Jones might have given you if he was still around in your day, which I suspect he may just have been. I may be wrong.
I think don't lose sight of the aim, you know. No, forget that. That's too cliched. Listen to your gut instinct. That's the advice I would give myself. We rely on our knowledge, our level of intellect, our common sense to make most decisions, our frontal cortex, if you like. But there are times when the answer or the way forward isn't glaringly obvious. I'm sure you've all been in that situation. I definitely have, you know. And the times when it isn't obvious, you've got to go with your gut instinct, even in bomb disposal sometimes, you know. And every single mistake I've made in my life, pretty much all of them are because I've gone against my gut instincts when I've been in that situation where there's no obvious, you know, route A or route B. And when I've succeeded, it's because I've gone with my gut instincts. And it's not some magical, of course, it's not some magical force. It's, you know, it's your brain working more quickly than you can rationalize something, I think, you know, and your experiences all combined. So I think, yeah, definitely listen to your gut instinct. And I think in terms of, what other, no, that's it. Yeah. We'll stick with that for now. Yeah. Stick with you.
Thank you, Chris. And I think you're right there, William. I think it was Hugh Jones that was still headmaster at Gwynedd when we were in school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was amazing. Yeah.
I think Peter wanted to come in with a question.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for an inspiring talk. We started off with a question of your most successful aspect. What about failure? What's your greatest failure?
I mean, how long have you got?
Most of the afternoon.
Yeah. I think, well, certainly not listening to my gut. Not listening, actually. Do you know, someone said to me the other day, the letters in listen are exactly the same letters in the word silent. And I think for so long, you know, I didn't listen. You know, it's a case of you listen, but you don't hear. You look, but you don't see. I was just a bit of a Genghis, you know. I used to jump in with both feet at everything. And it's great having passion and stuff. But I think, you know, what I said about trust and that sort of thing, you know, when I was younger, didn't really trust, I was single-minded, focused on my military career and stuff, but just not really having time for other people. And it wasn't that I was selfish per se. I think I was just so focused on things that didn't necessarily matter. And I guess, you know, as you chill out a bit and you're older, you realize that actually there are more important focuses, like people, like family, like relationships. So yeah, I think basically just not listening and probably not following my gut instinct.
Thanks, Chris. That's great.
Thanks, Peter. I'm going to allow one more question, Chris, if that's okay. And that's Emma's put something in the chat pane. And she's asking, is there anything you would do differently in terms of your career choices if you're looking back?
Yeah, the only thing I wouldn't have done, probably getting into television. My military career, 100%, loved it. When I got out and wrote some books, it led to book talks, which led to motivational talks, which led to some TV stuff. And I remember my literary agent saying to me, you're going to get all these very, very pretty ladies and very, very handsome gay guys coming up to you and telling you you're amazing and, you know, flirting with you and all this sort of stuff. And remember that it's their job. You know, they're the PR people. They're there to make you feel special. Remember that you're the same person as you were before. And I think it's easy sometimes to get to forget who you are, forget what you're all about, you know, forget the reality of things. And I've certainly seen it with some of my friends as well. Yeah, what was the actual question again? Sorry, I've done it again.
Okay, it's about what would you do differently in terms of your career choices?
I think
TV.
The one thing was the TV stuff. I think you sort of get into that world and it's just very, very fake. It's all about entertaining. It's all about here and now. It's all clickbait. The only thing I would do is probably stay well away from that side of things. I felt it was a bit of a waste of time. The rest of my career, then 100%, I wouldn't change a thing about it. Loved it, and especially loving it now, for sure.
That's amazing. Thanks, Chris. Really just a huge thank you from certainly from myself for you agreeing to give your time up today, and from all my PAVO colleagues and my colleagues across the third sector. I think this has been absolutely inspirational and amazing session. And you just said in that last answer actually around people telling you're amazing. I'm afraid you are amazing, so you're going to have to suck that up for today. Yeah. Maybe that's another story. No. But a huge thanks from the bottom of my heart and from everybody here. It's been an amazing week actually of sessions for the third sector and showcasing the work that's been going on across Powys, and it's people like yourselves that give your time up to come and talk to our conference. That we really, are grateful for that, and makes a difference. And I'm sure many of us will take learning from today and from all the sessions this week in our work going forward, trying to make a difference to our communities. So thank you. I'm going to ask Jen if she can run the poll very quickly. So nobody disappear until you filled in the poll, otherwise you're in trouble. There you go. Gareth says he owes you a pint when you're back. Yeah, absolutely safe. Safe. Few more weeks, I think, isn't it, Chris, in Iraq before you get back home to Hay. So hope that's safe for you, and that we catch up during the Christmas period when you're home in Hay. So everybody's filling in the poll. And another question as well, really, to everybody, as we said earlier on, the hashtags are there in the chat pane. If you scroll back, you'll find them, or Jen might put them in there. That would be great, so we can hear about. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought now. So you can tweet about this afternoon's session as well. That'd be great, thank you. And all that leaves me to say is a huge thank you to everybody for attending this afternoon. I hope you found that really interesting and valuable. We have the last session tomorrow morning, which is our AGM. So hopefully for all our members, you've done your voting. We look forward to seeing a number of you tomorrow at the AGM session, and our trustees as well. And I can see little Bree smiling away there. But a huge thanks to everyone for attending this afternoon, and hope to catch up with you all soon. So take care.